It's Red Eye Radio. Gary McNamara and Eric Harley talk about everything from politics to social issues and news of the day. Whether you're up late or you're just starting your day, welcome to the show. From the Uniden America Studios, this is Red Eye Radio.
Hello and welcome. He is Gary McNamara. I'm Eric Harley. As we move into a Monday, Gary, what do you know?
Well, if I get an ankle replacement, if I get a knee replacement, and I get a spine replacement, I think I'm going to be okay.
All right, simple fix then.
Yeah, the brain's doing okay, but the rest of the body is falling apart.
Yeah.
Played golf this weekend. I played for not playing at all because I have not played 18 holes in over a year. And I went to the driving range like 4 times in the last week, and I played very, very, very well. I sunk 4 putts over 20 feet. That means nothing to you.
Yeah.
Remember, it's that little hole there.
Yeah.
Congrats to you're not even paying attention to me.
No, what are you saying?
Congrats to
something about golf.
To Rory McIlroy.
Oh,
who
more
won the
golf.
Masters.
Huh? All right, fine.
I didn't see any of it. I didn't. I thought if I started watching it, I thought if this thing gets tied at the end, there's no way I'm going to get any sleep. So I decided to turn off the TV like 3:00. So
Any financial firm estimated the average? Once you hit the Grand Slam, those few golfers that have done it, what their earnings are, they're clearly higher once you've done that. But
you mean their earnings for
everything, endorsements, everything?
Yeah, it would be endorsements, and they have a new thing. I forgot what they call it. It's your importance to the PGA. There's like the higher you rank, they'll just give you $10 million.
They become part of the Pentaveret.
Personally, I think we ought to tariff it.
Well, yeah, because
that's tariff.
Well, wouldn't we just tariff the British Open though?
No, we tariff if anybody, because Rory McIlroy is, of course, from Ireland, so
right.
We get.
Oh, if anyone wins in the United States, we tariff their earnings.
We tariff their earnings.
All right, we can do that. I'm all for it.
Before we get any further, thank you to everybody who commented on X and on Facebook about my dad's birthday. I really appreciate it. I'll see him this Saturday, and I'm going to read as many of them as I can to him.
Yes, and thank you for all the kind words and happy birthdays to Mom. It was a great celebration. We had some outstanding barbecue, man. It was, seriously, I was like, wow. It was really great. I don't know if I was just craving barbecue. Man, I sat down Saturday afternoon at lunch at Mom's, and, oh, man. But had a great get-together. Had not one but 2 cakes.
Wow.
My sister brought one. My brother brought one. So one was an ice cream cake, and the other one was just a cake. Just a cake. But we hung out for a while. Had a great little talk show with my dad on everything. Got caught up there. Got caught up on all of his needs for his lawn and everything else. He'll be 92 in May.
Wow.
And so Mom's 87 now and was she was giving her dog, Fuzzy, some ice cream. She got a scoop of ice cream and put it in a bowl and set it right there for Fuzzy. And that kind of caused a little bit of a ruckus because, of course, after that, Fuzzy's going to need to go outside a little bit later, maybe spend some quality time in the yard. But it was so much fun. It was a great time.
Everyone knows now why we're still doing the show at our ages.
Yeah.
Genetics.
Yeah.
Red Eye Radio genetics are the best genetics.
Yeah. Right.
Red Eye Radio racism.
Yeah. You know, my mom keeps asking me, well, when are you going to retire? I said, Mom, I'm only 59. I'm not at retirement age yet. But my dad by the time my dad was in his early 60s, he had retired twice. He had 2 full careers, So he had nearly 20, it was almost 20 years exactly as a truck driver, but his military career, of course, before that. So But you know, so it's like your father, by almost your age, your father had retired twice. What are you doing? But no, it's the question she asks just about every time I'm there. You know, when are you going to retire? And I'm like, I don't have any intention of retiring.
You know, it's really cool. We had planned that next weekend would be the weekend we'd celebrate my father's birthday, my brother, and my sister when I come in town. They didn't even know it, but like, I think it was 4 different neighbors came over. They planned it, and they had a birthday celebration for my dad. They show up at the door, knock on the door. They let him in, and all the neighbors had a great party for him. So he gets 2 parties, and I got plenty of videos on it. It was just awesome. I'm like, I thought you guys were waiting for me. They said this wasn't us. This was the neighbors. They knew, and they all showed up. So it was really, really nice. The golf tournament was nice. Independent Bob says hello. His brother says hello, and it was really good. Didn't really have as many political conversations as I normally have. It really was. I don't know why. And normally, it's of course it's not me that initiates it ever. When I'm in, it's always somebody coming up to me who hasn't seen me, because most of these people I only see once a year. And it's great, and you know, you've met Tom before, but great salt of the earth people they are. But normally, I did get, have you retired yet? That's what I got. Have you retired yet? I go, no. You plan to? No. Really? Yes. And
one of my brothers asked me, he goes, how long have you been doing this now? I said, well, this one show, a little over 28 years, and then radio almost 41. And he said, wow. He said, he goes, you ever think about doing anything else? Not now, no. I think that's a little late. I was going to enlist in the Marines like you did when you were 18, but I'm pretty sure they won't take me.
You know, the good thing is, it's not only my age that would make me ineligible for the draft, it's the condition that my ankle, knee, and back are in.
Oh, the physical would be so long. It would be so horrible for them. Like, all right, let's start with the eye chart. Oh, no, you don't want to start there. Let's start with something else, Doc. It would be bad. It would take a long time.
Let's just get to the fun stuff first.
All right, what do we got?
All right. Reading here from the Daily Mail UK. At one point on the main Coachella stage, Billy Joe Armstrong from Green Day began belting out lyrics to American Idiot, but changed the lyrics to I'm not a part of a redneck agenda. I'm not a part of the MAGA agenda.
All right.
What a talented individual.
Sure.
What a talented individual to come up with that.
Yeah, no, that's about as creative as it gets, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I mean,
did he work hard on that?
With Bernie Sanders.
Yeah.
Out there. And
right.
They didn't put him on the main stage, though. They put him on the socialist stage.
I thought that was the main stage.
Well, you think about it, I think it's 2 weekends. It's this weekend and next weekend. And this, I think, so I wasn't sure if Green Day was in it. I didn't see it because they were reporting them when they were on the stage, but Green Day apparently was on last night. But you had, just shaking my head. You think about it, that when did their big album come out? 94? So it's 31 years
Somewhere
ago?
around there, yeah. Wow. Yeah.
So think about it. Think about, if you want to talk about 1970 and the protest of 1970, just to round it off.
Yeah, right, yeah.
That's as if somebody who had a hit album in 1939 came out.
Right.
And then if you think of Joan Baez and Neil Diamond, that would be people that had hits in the 1915 to 1925.
Right.
That were part of the protest movement in 1970.
Well, much of it before radio.
Yes, exactly. And
his first wire recording came out in 1916.
Wow.
Yeah, it's
the revolutionaries are here.
I wanted to go to Coachella once to just walk around. Can you tell me which stage Frankie Valli is on? Can you? Anyone?
That would be the new music alternative stage over here.
It's coming back around. Beach music is back, baby.
He's one of the young ones.
Yeah.
At Coachella this year.
Former bandmate of mine has been, I don't know if he is this year. Actually didn't check in on his Facebook page. He doesn't post a lot anyway, but he's been the chief lighting consultant for Coachella for a long time. They had to call him years ago, one time in the middle of the night. I don't know who the headliner was on the main stage, but they had this big light show with lasers and fog and the whole thing to make it look like a tunnel and all of that thing. And I don't know who it was. I have no idea. But they flew him out late Friday night. He lives in Nashville. And then he got out there and had to have everything done. Their deadline essentially was noon because all of the other acts had to do their thing, right? They have to use that stage. So he didn't have use of the stage after like 12 noon. So they flew him out in the middle of the night and he worked and he got it done apparently. And so they kept calling him back to make sure everything was going to, I guess lights is still a big deal. Not just regular lights, but I mean the light shows at Coachella. You know, I know that's not the one where they burn the big wooden guy, you know. Burning guy.
Burning man.
Burning guy.
The burning guy.
The burning guy. But
Burning Man Fest. Are they going to have to change it to have it the proper pronouns for burning?
Mm. Well, first of all,
it is the Burning Man Festival,
can
right?
you still openly burn?
You can't burn. You can't say man.
Vaping person. That doesn't have the same thing, does it? Like, are you going to vaping person? What? I'm sorry, what? Yeah, I look at that, and you know, YouTube had streaming channels, live streaming channels for every stage. For every stage. Coachella's official YouTube page.
I did see it when I went to YouTube. I just was too busy yesterday, but I wasn't looking for any of the shows. I was looking for Bernie Sanders.
I'm like, is this actually like, because my thought is, you know, I know Coachella wants to reach a broader audience in hopes of, I guess, enticing more people there in the future. I don't know. But I thought to myself, well, why would I go ever? If I could sit here and watch it on YouTube and hop from stage to stage, if I were interested, why would I go? You know, but maybe it's the opposite. People see it and go, okay, I want to be there. I want to stand in a sweaty crowd and watch somebody go off on Trump for 3 hours while I vape my weed. That's what I want to do. If you're asking, just in case you're asking,
it's interesting. It's interesting as we get older and our opinion of what entertainment is changes.
Well, you know,
mine really hasn't. I'd rather go see a band in a small club to begin with. I always have. That's been me since day one. I hate stadium shows.
Well, I used to go to the Texas Jam, the Texas World Music Festival. It was, you know, it's great. It was, you know, had a lineup of, tons of heavy rock acts,
and Styx,
and also Styx, and you know, after a few of those, I was young, you know. But after a few of those, it was like, I don't know why I'd ever go back. I did see some quality entertainment over the weekend, though. Brian Regan was the executive producer of this new stand-up special. It's Stephen Rogers. It's on YouTube. It's free. Stephen Rogers, Half of We, if you want clean comedy. So there's no cursing in it. It's very funny. And Brian Regan and Nate Bargatze are executive producers, both clean comics as well. I don't mind non-clean comedy, depending on, you know, who it is and you know what the cursing is about. I mean,
they're using it, right?
You know, but because I think like Kevin Hart is hilarious. You know, but I think to myself, if I'm going to be in a room, right, where my parents are sitting there, and could I watch this special in there, or with, you know, my grandkids, even though my older grandkids have heard everything pretty much. I look at clean comedy as it kind of stands out. It really does. I think it always has. And it's a great special. Stephen Rogers on YouTube. Brian Regan tweeted about it, and then we watched it on Friday evening, and it was very good. It was very, very funny. He's very funny.
Just the only reason we mentioned Styx, we actually like Styx. Mm-hmm. But we had to mention the Texas Jam where they came out and played Mr. Roboto, and Tommy Shaw, I'll never forget, from Styx saying, I thought we were going to get killed.
They're back to playing that song.
Are they really?
Yeah. And they're claiming now we didn't ever dislike the song.
I think there's tape that shows they did.
They said we joked about it, but we loved the song, and the crowd's going wild for it these days.
Yeah, I can imagine, because it all comes back.
You could eventually people will go to Clay Aiken concerts again. Okay, I'm joking. That's not going to happen.
866-90-RED-EYE.
This report is brought to you by Shell Rotella. With advanced synthetic technology, is designed to help keep your rig running with more mileage and less maintenance. Cold weather takes a toll on trucks. As warmer weather rolls in, it's time to assess the impact winter has had on your vehicle to help avoid downtime and keep your rig rolling through to next winter. Spring temperature swings can cause your tire pressure to fluctuate. Start your spring maintenance routine by checking your tire pressure and make sure your tires are properly inflated based on the load you're hauling. Underinflated tires cause premature wear, reduced fuel economy, and premature tire failures. Take care of your tires now before you find yourself stranded roadside this spring.
Get in touch with Red Eye Radio, toll free at 866-90-RED-EYE.
It's Red Eye Radio. He's Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. The one story that got me that I said, all right, here we go. We finally can change the topic with something that the entire universe is concerned about.
Golf?
No.
Oh.
The declassified document posted to the CIA website is raising eyebrows with claims of an alleged UFO attack on Soviet forces. This is where the report describes a retaliatory alien attack after Soviet soldiers reportedly shot down a UFO flying over a military base. The aliens reportedly emerged from the wreckage, fusing together into one object and bursting into a bright light and turning all but two of the soldiers into the ground. The report, published by the Canadian Weekly World News.
Yeah.
So they got me all excited. Everybody was reporting it.
Yeah.
And then they tell me that the article was published in May of 2000 by the Canadian Weekly World News.
In May of 2000?
Yes.
25 years ago.
25 years ago. Weekly World News. That's
Weekly
what the topic's
World
about.
News. Because, you think to yourself, and I don't know, are there any, if you think about it, the internet has become the, those propaganda rags that used to be on the tabloid type rags that used to be on the newsstand. The internet has basically become that.
Right.
The point is there's no demand for them when you've got the internet, right? And because I think to myself, well, in some ways they're irrelevant, but in a lot of ways, if they could keep it together, they would actually have a lot of viral posts these days. I don't know if they are still around, but you think about the Inquirer and all that stuff from the past and all those tabloid things. But it also sounds like the plot from the first Iron Man, doesn't it?
I know.
Isn't that a movie? I think we saw that.
And I'm thinking, this really should be interesting, as reported by the Weekly World News.
Right.
I'm like, oh my God.
You're listening to Red Eye Radio from the Uniden America Studios.
It's Red Eye Radio. He is Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Just so people know, because you have to remember that everybody is not our ages. But when we talked about the declassified document posted on the CIA website from the story that summarizes an article published by the Weekly World News that Soviet soldiers fought a UFO and they turned them to stone. And when I saw that yesterday, and everybody was reporting it, everyone, I don't care who you were, you read the headline, you're like, okay, fine. I get to the Weekly World News. Well, that's where your source is, the Weekly World News? Really? Weekly World News was... You used to have the National Enquirer. The National Enquirer, compared to the Weekly World News, was a credible journalistic organization.
Yeah. Along the way, I think, in their history, I think they got 2 stories right. So that's huge.
Yeah, exactly. That gave them tremendous credibility compared to the Weekly World News. Just tell you how bad it was. But it was so funny because I'd seen the headline all day yesterday. And it wasn't, I'm like, okay, I got to check that story. I got to check that story out. And I'm getting all excited going, wow, everybody's reporting this. I mean, all the conservative magazines, everyone's reporting this. What is it? What is it? Summarized from a story from the Weekly World News.
25 years ago.
Oh, my God. Oh. Apparently sources don't matter at all. Even if you name the sources, it doesn't change anybody's mind. No, we're going to print that. Yeah, we can print what the source was, Weekly World News. And I'm thinking to myself, well, there's a ton of people, because how long have they been out of business?
I don't know, probably 25 years.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen, I've not seen, when I go to the supermarket now, remember where the tabloids all used to be?
Yeah.
Nothing's there.
No, it's all candy now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so just a little update there, but how disappointed I was. I'm like, oh, come on.
Yeah.
The aliens couldn't be that bad if they're turning Russian soldiers into stone.
Right. Yeah.
And I'm sorry. It's just ridiculous. So what else happened this weekend, huh?
Not much.
What's going on? We hit the big liberal stuff. Oh, coming up a little bit later on in the show, we mentioned Douglas Schoen last week. On Democrats. He's a Democrat advisor or Democrat strategist from a long time ago. Roy Teixeira wrote an article, too, about how the Democrats are just completely failing.
Yeah.
Just, completely failing still, that they basically just don't get it. Interesting weekend. Nothing surprised me, though, as to what happened over the weekend when I did talk to anybody, because, like I said, I was at the golf tournament. The only thing people asked me about the tariffs were, how long will the price? That's everybody I talked to was a business person, which was, how long do you think the tariffs are going to last? Because will Republicans lose if this stays in effect for the midterms? That's what they were concerned about. And I said, I don't know. I said, I can't.
Well, you're watching the markets on Friday. Everything was on the downside until they said, well, we think there may be a deal in the works. We think the president said something to the effect of, I believe we can make a deal with China. And then the markets turned, and was up several hundred for the day. And I thought, well, and that could go south again. Well, then you saw on Saturday, my dad and I had been talking about tariffs, and then all of a sudden the breaking news came across. All right, cell phones and laptops are going to be exempt from China. And I'm thinking to myself, well, that's a huge chunk of it right there. But that's the work of all of the lobbying done by companies like Apple, who were scrambling. And you see the story of the big 3 automakers, over $100 billion on the tariff front. And some experts are now saying, well, they may, instead of just adding that direct tariff, the cost of that direct tariff to the one vehicle, spreading it out over the cost of pretty much everything, including the service department. I don't know if that's going to turn out to be true. That was an analyst that one of the analysts saying that.
Well,
but if you're looking at passing on the cost, what's the greater impact? Because if you add 25%, this would be the non-USMCA compliant vehicles. If you added a total of 25% to the sticker price, well, it's going to sit there. You're going to brick that car, whatever it is. And so again, the question would be, how long before? I think the automotive industry has been crying uncle from the beginning, which is why they delayed that. Remember, the initial delay for the automotive industry was put in because they lobbied. They called the White House. Some of the things that were happening last week, as I had said, I don't know, this goes back a ways. There's no doubt that the CEOs and the heads of these major corporations and industries are calling the White House, and they were essentially calling Susie Wiles, and the White House kind of had to explain, well, that's how it works. You call Susie, and then she gets the message to the president. But these are people that know the president. Many of them know the president and have dealt with him in the past, and felt like, well, we don't have any other choice. We got to go direct to the White House, and did that. The automotive industry had been doing that for a while. The president, the day he announced the tariffs, had a UAW worker on stage with him, who, by the way, I don't know if he's used to doing that. Worker is used to doing public speaking, but I thought he did actually a pretty good job in terms of why he was there. But it was not, the thing is that it's not over. It's not the massive retail impact has yet to be felt. And when that starts getting reported, I think this is why the White House really wanted to get it out there on Friday afternoon, that there might be a deal with China. The president is confident they can work things out. Well, but that has to happen in order for the real effect to be felt.
Well, the confusion continued. Actually, it came out, I think it was like 10:30 to 11 o'clock Friday night is when they actually announced it, the Customs and Border Protection on the tariffs. Mm-hmm. So that came directly from the administration, mm-hmm. Because they get it down, okay, here's what it is, and then they announced what the tariffs were going to be, or they announced the reduction that they weren't going to charge these particular items with 125% tariff. And then that was the optimism that went all through the weekend. And then the president on the plane yesterday mm-hmm. said, no, there's no exceptions for anyone. The 20% fentanyl tax will be there, and we're going to put it in a different category. But he never mentioned the 125%. Right. So there's complete and total confusion now in the marketplace as to what the tariff policy is. Mm-hmm. And as you said, number one, it's these manufacturers calling because someone said, well, why do other countries have tariffs? And we said, because they wish to protect those industries for political reasons. Mm-hmm. And then you get lobbying people that put the tariffs on to protect big industries in these countries. Then they get lobbied, which means they get more money in order to support their campaign from those people because they're doing them a favor. Right. But you can see what I see over the weekend is what I would expect, as we said. And it's funny that this is controversial to some people, not the majority, but we said economics is going to decide where the tariffs go. And you can see it right now. This is a White House that over the weekend, just because of everything that happened, is showing they don't know what to do. Mm-hmm. Because what you're getting, this is the reality. There's the economic reality, and then there's the political reality. And the economic reality is when you started seeing some of those figures coming out from Apple saying iPhone could cost $2,300 now. Yeah. Well, you can't have that kind of a hit. So you're talking about an economic reaction and then the political reaction, which is these companies calling you and plus, calling you and saying, you've got to do something. Then that gets out there. Mm-hmm. Then when you look at the polling over the last 10 days on all of this, the one thing, the worst issue that the president has right now is inflation in the economy. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's and it's being driven by, and when it comes to China, yeah, people believe there should be, that we should keep them in line. But the rest of them, is where the public completely disagrees with the president, including a significant number of independents and Republicans on that. But China, people say, no, we need to punish China. And all of a sudden it's like iPhones go from what? Whatever you do the plan with, I have an Android phone, and so I ended up paying $500 or $600 for my last one, not the $1,300 original price. But if you're buying them on the plan or whatever it is for $700 or $800, and that goes up to $2,100, people are going to notice. If TVs go up, people are going to notice. If electronics go up, people are going to notice immediately. That will have an immediate impact. So you're dealing with the economic fallout and the political fallout. And this is a White House now that is almost this weekend. To me, it was like pinball reaction. Go this way, go back this way, go back this way. They don't know what to do. They don't know what the formula is to make it perfect. But that's the problem when you have a central government attempt to set economic policy and make it all work across the board. Yeah. It's impossible to do that.
Well, and you look at those things, and there is that emotional connection to the smartphone, but then there is, when you get down to it, it really is, people see it as the necessity.
Yeah.
We can say, well, we remember a time when we didn't have one for many years, and we didn't need one, and blah, 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 blah. The world works based on a smartphone. Being connected, staying connected is imperative. Parents more and more giving their kids phones to stay connected. And you can say, well, they don't need to do this. They don't need to do this. Is the reality. That's already gone. That's already happened. That's already in place. When you try and reverse something like that, whether it's an emotional buy or not, you look at people saying, I can't live, because their position is, I can't live without my phone, but I'm not going to buy a new one. And people will just wait. They'll sit and wait until the fix is in. And if they believe that they have to wait, that it is politically driven, then for those in the middle, that's going to change hearts and minds in the opposite direction, which gets back to what's worse, a trade imbalance or having the Democrats in power?
And when the worst argument that's ever used in economics is, but people should do this.
Right.
They don't need this. They should. Right. You project and say people, that never works. People are going to do what people are going to do. That's right. When we talk economics, it's how people respond to incentive and disincentive. That's it.
Right.
And you can sit there and say, but they should do that. Doesn't matter what you think. They don't care.
Right. Try going door to door to your neighbors telling them what they should and shouldn't do.
Right.
Good luck with that.
That's the worst economic argument out there. And you've heard it a lot.
Well,
people should do this so they don't, your 401k.
Yeah.
I don't care if my 401ks lose. You're not really losing money because it's only on paper.
Mm-hmm.
Stop telling people what they should think about their own money.
Right.
That's always a loser.
That's their savings, not yours.
Yeah. That's always a loser argument.
Right.
Always.
Well, imagine someone coming to your door telling you what you should think. It tells you they're not winning. That's not a winning argument. That's not somebody who's winning when they say, well, they shouldn't do that. Well, sorry, that's not an argument.
866-90 Red Eye.
We'll be right back with more Red Eye Radio with Eric Harley and Gary McNamara.
It's Red Eye Radio. He is Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Welcome and good morning. Thanks so much for being here this morning. Yeah, so the weekend, it's like, industry business wakes up today and said, you don't really know what the tariffs are right now.
Right.
You don't know what's happening.
Yeah.
You mentioned the auto tariffs. We'll get into that coming up here in a little bit about what United States auto companies are saying. The hit's going to be to to them. But with the whole China thing, like I said, and Trump was going after the media for reporting what his own administration reported on Friday.
Right. Yeah.
And it's just like, okay, They don't know. And then he said, no, we're not dropping tariffs. The 20% tariff's still on. We're not talking about the 20% tariff. We're talking about the 125% tariff. Is that on? Well, no, we're moving it to a different bucket. What does that mean? Nobody has any idea now with the Chinese products coming in what's eventually going to be tariffed and what's not, because we've actually gotten to the point where the administration told Customs and Border Patrol Friday, here's what you're going to put the tariffs on. They reported it. A day went by. Nobody said anything except, oh, boy, the hit's going to come. And then by Sunday, it's like, why is the media reporting this? There's no exceptions at all. It's only going to be 20%. It's going to be 20%, and we're moving it to a different exemption. Well, what does that mean?
Right. Yeah, where are we?
Top of the Hour News is brought to you by House Products. Visit houseproducts.com.
This is Red Eye Radio on Westwood One. Now, it's Red Eye Radio. Gary McNamara and Eric Harley talk about everything from politics to social issues and news of the day. Whether you're up late or you're just starting your day, welcome to the show. From the Uniden America Studios, this is Red Eye Radio.
All across America, we are Red Eye Radio. He is Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Good morning. Thanks so much for being here. Coming up here in a little bit, Bill Maher getting hit by the left for meeting with Trump. Just fascinating stuff.
Yeah. How dare you?
You know, over the weekend, like I said, I talked to a lot of people. The most frequent thing I got was, look, I understand what Trump is trying to do with the tariffs, and I agree with him. But how long are prices going to be up? Because we still need to win the midterm in 2028. It's like, okay, that's...
Or 2026.
I said the midterm and 2028.
Oh, and I thought you said at 2020.
Yeah, the midterm in 2028.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, and this picked up steam over the weekend, why are we exempting this? This would have been from Friday. Now, they claim they're not exempting it, but they didn't mention the 125%. It makes no sense to exempt finished goods largely manufactured in China while continuing to put maximum tariffs on imports that U.S. manufacturers need to make things.
Yeah.
And I talked to somebody who actually used to work for a foreign company who was stating that we provide stuff for the United States. We used to, he doesn't work there anymore. We provided stuff for U.S. manufacturers to make things.
Right.
Now the tariff's going to be on that. So if it's assembled in America, you're going to be hurting those jobs too.
Yeah.
And when you look here at the that was the really didn't get into any intense conversations at all. It's just they want somebody, for example, because we're a talk show host, thinks we have an insight as to what Trump's going to do, and it's like, guys, I don't know. I don't know where this is going. I don't know.
There are people in the White House that don't know where it's going.
Yeah. But New York Post had this one. Trump's tariffs on foreign auto imports will cost U.S. car makers nearly $108 billion, with the Detroit's Big Three getting slammed the hardest despite having plants in the United States, according to the study. The 25% tax on foreign auto parts, imports, and parts went into effect on April 3rd. It is expected to impact 17.7 million vehicles, tacking on an estimated $107.7 billion in cost, the Center for Automotive Research based in Ann Arbor reported. The Trump administration has argued that taxes are meant to woo manufacturing back to the United States, since import taxes will not affect made-in-USA vehicles. However, the levies will hit U.S. automakers, since many of their models are built with parts sourced from other countries. The roughly 500 auto lines in the United States had at least 10% of their components imported from outside the U.S. and Canada, according to the latest National Highway Transportation 2025 data set. The majority of automakers recorded, though, much higher shares. Around 40% of their components are made from other countries. The big three, Ford, General Motors, and Stellantis, which owns brands like Jeep and Ram, will bear much of the brunt despite their substantial U.S. manufacturing. The taxes are expected to cost them $41.7 billion, according to the study which was released this week. This in-depth study by the Center of Automotive Research demonstrates the significant cost the 25% tariff will have on the automotive industry, said Matt Blunt, president of the American Automotive Policy Council, told the New York Post in a statement. American automakers Ford, GM, and Stellantis intend to maintain our ongoing dialogue with the administration to achieve our shared goals of increased U.S. automotive production. Analysts have warned that automakers will likely pass at least some of the tariff costs to their customers. As you said earlier, those added costs will likely be distributed across the broader automotive ecosystem, meaning all aspects of the auto supply chains will grow more expensive. You even mentioned that there was one projection that it would even affect the service department.
Yeah, right. And because the parts are going to be, the parts that they use are going to be tariffed.
Yep. The research firm warned its estimate is likely on the low side due to cross-border trade activity, since auto production channels are especially complex. For example, a U.S. automaker that imports parts from China and then sends them to Mexico for manufacturing would have to pay multiple fees at each border stop. So some automakers have already taken steps to mitigate the impact of the tariffs. General Motors planning to ramp up production at its Indiana plant, but other automotive makers could feel the pressure to shutter factories or order layoffs, as when we talked about the 900 workers that Stellantis laid off.
Yeah, they're pausing production in Mexico and Canada, not shutting it down permanently yet, but pausing it so far.
And laying off 900 workers across 5 U.S. facilities. So, again, it gets complicated when you try to do it. And like I said, I have no clear idea where they're going.
Well,
every day is a different day.
If we're talking U.S. jobs, then there are jobs at retail that are at retail level that are going to be affected. Because as long as the prices are higher and become more and more prohibitive for the consumer, then you're going to see a slowdown. And when you see that slowdown, you see layoffs at the retail level. And those are American jobs. And that's what you're going to see. And right now, GM ramping up their plant in Indiana, you haven't seen this big yet. You haven't seen this big announcement of we're moving all assembly back to the U.S. None of them have said that because it's clear right now they're not confident this will be permanent. So I guess it depends on how long it goes, how long the pressure is on.
Well, remember when they said a couple weeks ago, these are a couple weeks ago, was it last week? These are the tariffs, no exceptions at all. We said there's going to be exceptions.
Well, yeah.
And you see the exceptions now are coming all over the place as the lobbying starts. And one of the concerns that Democrats have already said, the big corporations, they get the ear of the president. The small company does not.
Right. Well, you see a number of smaller companies. You'll see this in the local news. There was a local story here. There was a wine wholesaler. Wow, you talk about the emotional buy, wine and cell phones. Yeah. You start affecting wine and people's cell phones. Who are they going to text when they're trying to get drunk? This is the, this again, when you look at the big picture, if you're looking at the impact here, then you have to look at the impact on jobs of American jobs at the retail level. We saw this during the automotive bailout thing in 2008, 2009. And the Obama administration was trying to say, well, this isn't, we're looking to protect jobs. Well, you're actually, the problem is going to be ultimately, if those companies, go away or have to consolidate or, whatever they have to do, there's going to be an adjustment. You're going to lose jobs at the retail level. And remember, they said, we're doing it so we can keep all these dealerships open. And ultimately, they had to consolidate. There was a lot of consolidation at that time anyway. They have to adjust. Business has to adjust to what the consumer is doing. And when you pass this on to the consumer, and it's the only way you can do this. Importers have to pass it on to the consumer. Otherwise, the importers are gone, and it's over. When Stellantis pauses the assembly in Mexico and Canada, it means supply is going to be down. And also, when the price hits the retail level in the automotive sector, you're going to see also a greater demand for used vehicles, which means what? Those prices go up as well. Cash for clunkers will mean something totally different.
Look, as we said, this will always be decided by economics, and there's an economic hit. And the other thing is, we have always said, how long will the American public go for price increases? Initially this was sold by the administration that there's no problem. It wasn't really until a month and a half ago when they started saying, okay, well, yeah, there's going to be a transition period where you're going to have to pay higher prices. Well, now that concern is out there because that's isn't what they were selling 6 months ago or a year ago or even 2 years ago or 3 years ago.
Right.
It was everything was, is going to be great. And that's why we said you need to be consistent on your message with complete clarity. And that's the last thing you've gotten over the last 2 weeks.
Yeah. Even over the weekend.
That's what I meant.
It's not, the conversation about China was like, again, watching a tennis match. It was just back and forth. And nobody has any clarity as to where it's going. Right now, the last I checked a few minutes ago, the Dow futures are up. But again, the sentiment in the last half of the trading day later in the trading day on Friday was that, again, based on the comment that, yeah, we believe Trump is confident. He said he's confident that there will be a deal with China. I said last week that I wouldn't be shocked if there was a pause on the tariffs on China in order to get some kind of deal done. But I don't know. You
can strike a deal. Nobody is doubting that. Of course, it's always what is the deal. We heard the run-up to USMCA, how it was going to completely change NAFTA. Well, a deal was made, and he promoted the greatest trade deal ever, which now he views as a piece of crap. So, as we always said, Trump back then, and everybody, was saying art of the deal, and we went, that's fine, say what you want. We were happy that he didn't do what he said he was going to do with USMCA. We were pleased with it. And all of his surrogates said, NAFTA's gone, and we've got this brand new deal. Everything is different. And we said, okay, if you wish to believe that, that's okay, but it's not. It's the vast majority of USMCA is exactly what NAFTA is. And I think the president felt that, in my opinion, the only option is he felt burned that time that I actually didn't get what I want. And so you can get a deal, but it's the deal that they've been talking about where the president has for 50 years said the problem is the trade deficit.
Right.
And that's what they did a week ago. Everything was based on the trade deficit. It wasn't based on unfair tariffs. So are you saying that China is now going to agree to purchase as much from the United States as we purchase from them? Well, that may not be the trade. And again, what we get is, well, no, that was never his intent to begin with. Whatever the deal he gets is what his art of the deal is. Well, we don't buy that.
Even if you went 10% across the board, there's still going to be a retail impact,
Oh, yeah.
And it's a different, obviously different level of impact and has to be measured. That's the one thing we talked about last week is that the retail, the actual impact will then start to make news. Okay, here's what consumers are doing in response to what's going on with pricing. And that will make news, and that will further drive the market, tell the market, okay, this is where it's going, at least until it ends or something changes.
And we said from the very beginning, Our only goal, look, we go through cycles like this all the time. What we want from Republicans and conservatives, which is how I vote, because Democrats offer me nothing, is honesty and consistency in what you're going to do. Be precise as to what your goal is and don't be changing. They've changed a bunch of different times. And then when they change a bunch of different times, they say, well, what is the purpose? All of them. Well, you can't do all of them. Yeah. And so, like I said, it sows confusion, which means capital sits there. And people don't want to invest capital because they don't know what's going to go on. And the worst thing you can do to an economy is sideline everyone. And now this whole 90-day, again, pause, and then everything happened over the weekend, investors are looking, going, we don't know what to do.
Right.
That's the problem. When you don't know what to do, you're not going to invest the capital.
Right.
And, that is our concern. Do I believe, somebody wrote us the other day, do you believe Trump's trying to destroy the economy? Absolutely not. I think he believes it. Navarro believes it. They all believe that their theory is you can tariff, that the United States is powerful enough to force people into free trade agreements where we get all the trade surplus and or are even with trade with every country, and that's the perfect way for a government to engineer an economy.
And
we wholeheartedly disagree with that.
Well, there's no way to have a surplus with every trade partner out there. Just won't have to have trade balance. Won't happen.
Going after China, no problem. Going after people and true reciprocal tariffs, no problem. But it's what is the ultimate goal? And Trump for 50 years has talked about not unfair trade as much as he's talked about the trade deficit. That's what has to be cured. And that's when they came up with the algebra problem that they made an error in that had nothing to do with tariffs, that simply had to do with trade deficits.
Yeah, it's, you introduce the issue with the bond markets, and that becomes totally different, too, and basically has everybody asking, how much leverage do you really have when all of that's in play?
That was a question that I forgot. That was another question I got over the weekend. What about people are trying to understand what's going on with the whole bond thing. They didn't fully understand. And when I was telling them, I said, well, basically what these countries are saying is if you're going to tariff us and we already have a trade agreement with you, a lot of these countries are saying, well, we don't, if you're going to break this deal, we're not going to service your debt. We don't know what you might do.
Well, and when you do that, when you have these major trade partners that say, we no longer want to invest in your debt, they're telling the market that it's not wise to invest in U.S. Treasuries. And that becomes a massive, massive problem.
866-90 Red Eye.
Brought to you by FPPF, Fuel Power Max.
Just because idling is common doesn't make it smart. Idling a diesel uses about a gallon of fuel per hour, which can cost you about $180 per week at $4.50 per gallon if your truck idles 8 hours a day. Idling easily can cost you a few thousand more in fuel alone per year, not including the added engine maintenance expense that results from excessive idling. Harder on your truck's engine than highway driving. In addition to operating costs, many governments impose no idling laws and regulations with fines as high as $25,000. Instead, there are many alternatives. An extra blanket for cold temperatures, window screens for when the weather is warm, bunk heaters, and various auxiliary power unit options abound in this day and age too, many powered just by batteries. Otherwise, diesel and gas gensets burn far less fuel than your truck's engine. Research options to find your fit. Owner-Operator Business 101 is provided by Overdrive's Partners in Business program. Go to overdriveonline.com to the Partners in Business section of the website for more details on this and many other topics.
Brought to you by Shell Rotella. With advanced synthetic technology is designed to help keep your rig running with more mileage and less maintenance.
Coming up, more with Gary McNamara and Eric Harley. It's Red Eye Radio.
It's What I Radio. He is Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Welcome and good morning. Thanks so much for being here. So we'll see what happens this week. But like we've always said, what will eventually, and you've seen it, what eventually will settle the whole concept of tariffs is economics.
Yeah.
And the economic reality, and then followed by the political reality. And the economic reality we saw last week, I did find it interesting, when the president came out and they said, well, this is all part of the president's art of the deal plan. No, it wasn't. How do you know that? Because the president said that.
Right. Yeah.
Remember? They backed off because of the bond market.
Right.
He said it.
Mm-hmm.
And the bond market, what was going on there was a result of the tariffs. That's economics changing their mind.
Catch all 5 hours of the show live every night on the Red Eye Radio app. Available in the App Store. Red Eye Radio.
And he is Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Welcome and good morning. Thanks so much for being here. As always, we appreciate it. Download our Red Eye Radio app today, and you can listen when and where you choose. So, I'm sitting here reading from Roy Teixeira from the Liberal Patriot. Now, Roy, like Douglas Schoen, back when Biden was running, this goes back to what, maybe May or June of last year, both wrote articles saying, they need to be promoting more MAGA issues, the Democrats. Mm-hmm. And so when, and we said to both of them, when those articles were written, we said they can't do that. Nobody would buy that as credible to begin with, especially these people, especially Biden at that time. Biden couldn't have done that. And then Harris came along and tried to do that, and it didn't work. Well, he talks about where the Democrats are right now. And he brings up the one weakness of Trump and the Republicans right now, and that is the cost of tariffs. Prices. Yeah. That people want prices down. And he goes to the one of the polls from last month that showed Trump administration focusing on lowering prices, 64% not enough, 31% the right amount, 5% too much, focusing on lowering prices, but 64% said not enough. The Trump administration is focusing on putting tariffs on, not enough, 7%. Right amount, 38%. Too much, 55%. He views that as the weakness, which is what every Republican conservative I talked to this weekend said to me, even if they totally agreed with the president across the board.
Right.
Everybody knows the tariffs are going to increase prices. Every Republican conservative I talked to said, yeah, that's what makes me nervous. I understand the point he's trying to do. I agree with him on the point. But it's what we said a couple of weeks ago. If it's, should we have massive tariffs to attempt to redo, manufacturing and everything? Because that would affect manufacturing services. Should we attempt to rearrange the global economy? Is that more important? If it puts Democrats in charge for the next decade in the United States. And that's the one thing that people were talking about. He's giving Democrats an open if prices stay, and we don't know where he's going to go. And he's been now in office since January, and we still don't know where the tariffs are going to go. If the economy is hit and we lose the midterms, what do we do? And they think I have the answer because I'm a talk show host, and I went, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what they're thinking inside the White House. I know what their overall theory is. And that is to balance the trade deficit, the goods trade deficit. And I said, which would be impossible to do with every country, because that's the Trump. How do I know that? Because Trump said it a week ago. That would be their goal. Every single country has to have the exact same amount of trade. You can't do that. That scares a lot of investors when you hear that kind of talk coming from the president, who right now has the authority to do it, because they say that's impossible. So what's the goal? As long as people don't know the goal, that means the capital sits on the sideline. That's the concern of everyone, and prices going up and losing the midterm. That's, even if they agree with the president, the concern about losing the midterm and putting Democrats in power was the number one thing I heard from Republicans this weekend.
Well, and then the confidence lost in the U.S. Treasuries, that's a big deal as that reverberates. And if, again, you have major trade partners that send the message to the bond markets that it's a risky, very risky investment, we don't want to take that risk in that, then others reconsider that. And then you've got a monster. This isn't a little bit of pain. This is a lot of pain that could be long lasting. That situation with the bond markets changes your leverage at the table with each of these trade partners.
Yes, that was also brought up, too. People were wondering, what does that mean? And when I explained it to them, they said, well, then, does Trump have the advantage that he thinks he has? And I said, I don't know. You'd have to ask him. I don't know what he thinks he has when it comes to doing it. But we saw the reaction that he admitted that they decided to take a pause because of the bond market.
Mm-hmm. And that really hasn't greatly improved. You're basically hovering in the same spot.
I just saw a little while ago, it was 4.46%. So we're back at 4.5% for the 10-year tonight. I mean, I was just less than an hour ago when I checked that.
It hasn't really moved.
But then he talks about what their solution is. Mm-hmm. And he goes through the three, which is true. He goes, the first one, the approaches from the Democrats right now, resist. This is the default option for most Democrats. Everything Trump does must be resisted at all times. The latest economic problems are just one more of the manifestation of his unspeakable evil. The important thing is to fight. Those like Chuck Schumer, who pursue practical compromises, should be pushed aside in favor of leaders who wave the blue flag of resistance high. Cory Booker's 25-hour filibuster against the administration is precisely the right spirit. The nationwide hands-off demonstration on April 5th shows that the masses are rallying to the cause. Well, implicitly, hands-off also means hands-off all Democratic priorities, programs, and interest groups. In other words, a return to the status quo, which we already know the populist working-class voters don't want.
Right.
This approach seems well designed to rally the Democratic faithful going into the midterms, but does not change the image of the Democratic Party. Number two, fight the oligarchy. Yeah. This is a close cousin to the resist approach, which essentially juices it with a heavy dose of naive economic populism. Basically, not only is Trump doing all these terrible things, but he's doing them to enrich the oligarchy and maintain their power. They twirl their mustaches and laugh, ha, 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 as Trump does their bidding. This approach is particularly popular on the left of the party and is currently on a nationwide tour.
Yeah.
With AOC and the ageless Bernie Sanders perhaps coming soon to a theater near you.
Maybe.
And he goes, I get why they think it's a good idea. As noted, it certainly makes sense that in our current populist era, Democrats need to be responsive to that populist mood, but it makes much less sense that an aggressive economic populist pitch by itself is a sort of get-out-of-free-jail card for a party whose brand among working-class voters have been profoundly damaged. In fact, it's completely ridiculous, accompanying myth for Democrats who don't want to make hard choices. He goes, to begin with, Democrats have plenty of oligarchs on their side. You can't make that case. That seem less interested in fighting the oligarchy. Remember J.B. Pritzker, who proudly proclaimed himself a billionaire at the Democratic Convention? Mm-hmm. And the countless other fabulously wealthy individuals on the Democratic orbit. Voters are not unaware of this fact.
Right.
They know. But we didn't mention George Soros. Mm-hmm. So the oligarchy is simply, again, you're trying to hold your base together. It's something that we have said. All these things are doing is trying to hold their base together, but they're not reaching out to independence. And then what happened a couple of weeks ago when they started with their, maybe it was a month ago, but it became more popular, the Abundance Now. Mm-hmm. Now, they're using the term, as we said, incorrectly. Abundance Now means, and this is interesting in the age of tariffs, abundance now is that capitalism and conservatism provides you abundance of stuff.
Yeah.
Well, their abundance now is that if we can streamline regulation in government, we can give you all the democratic priorities and invest in the government. It's about making the government more efficient to make the government more powerful.
Right. Yeah.
And it's like, however, the very elites that such a centrist populism might target are by and large Democrat, presenting an awkward position for abundance Democrats. And he talked about the goals, moreover, the goals of the abundance approach tend to be linked to the concept of abundance that does not line up well with the preferences of actually existing working class voters who quite simply want to be richer and have more stuff. Abundant Democrats, on the other hand, seem to have a mind of a socially liberal ecotopia that is highly appealing to the educated upper middle class liberals, but much so less to the working class. And he talked about, the fact that even Ruben Gallego said every Latino man wants a huge truck.
Yeah.
Because that's what they're talking about. And he said abundance there means, well, yeah, electricity will be there, but it'll be much more expensive. Because abundance is not about bringing the cost of anything down. Said so while he looks at the potential weakness if Republicans and the administration can't get prices down, and if the tariffs put the country into a recession, that the Democrats have something that they could fight, but they're fighting it completely wrong.
Yeah, right. Well, because we know they support tariffs.
Exactly. That's
and have for the longest time.
Exactly. They've always been pro-tariff.
Yeah.
That's.
Bernie said it in 2016. I agree with Mr. Trump on tariffs. And Bernie, remember, the return of Bernie is happening right now. I mean, at least in conversation.
The interesting thing is he doesn't seem to have any answers because he says Democrats who truly want to find their way in our current populist era need some new approaches, but first they should accept that they're still lost. That is the beginning of wisdom and renewal. But he doesn't even know, where do you go? Remember, he's the one that said they need to be more MAGA and embrace what Donald Trump is doing back in June and July of last year.
Which they can't do effectively. She tried it, and it was laughable. Of course, everything she does is laughable, but anyone on the left trying that that's hilarious. They can't recenter. They can't turn at all. Bill Maher can't have dinner with Trump.
Yeah, well, some of that coming up. Oh, and then just doubling down on the radical transgender movement. Mm-hmm. They just can't get it. It's the fear-mongering. There's no fear-mongering.
Right.
On the radical transgender, there's no fear-mongering.
No.
It's simply, no, you're not a woman.
We're not changing science.
Right. And then now the thing is, they're not following the science because these professors in universities, it's like, say no. Gender-affirming care, that they are who they say they are. The science proves it.
Right.
It's like, you've done that already. You've lost that argument.
Right. Nobody buys it.
Nobody buys your science.
Yeah.
Do you think if professors came out today at liberal universities and said gravity doesn't exist, so lean over the cliff, that people would?
Water is dry. The earth is flat. What do you know? I mean, if you're going to change it, change everything. Yeah. But they've been trying to do this for the longest time with climate change and everything else. Well, why not this?
Why not?
Yeah.
866-90-RED-EYE.
Lines open for your calls. 866-90-RED-EYE on Red Eye Radio.
It's Red Eye Radio. He is Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Welcome and good morning. The left doesn't like that Bill Maher met with Trump. We'll get to that story. Ooh, Speaker Mike Johnson says he is no big fan of the rumored idea to raise the top tax rate.
Yeah, that's more than a rumor, by the way, Speaker Johnson. But that's a good sign. Let's see where it goes. You know, this is the problem with everything that's going on Capitol Hill. I have zero confidence in any direction. Honestly, I got zero. It's in part largely due to the history of how it all works and what you and I have covered over the years. But the GOP, you know, Obama famously said, never underestimate the ability of Joe Biden to F things up. Well, you and I have been saying that about the GOP for a long, long time.
Well, it's funny because as I was asked this weekend, so where's everything going? You know, you're the guy. You spend all this time researching and doing everything. Exactly where is Trump and the Republicans going to go? I don't know.
Look, I'm a gambling guy. I still don't know. I wouldn't even put a quarter down on any of this.
I have a general direction on the vast majority of the issues, but on tariffs, because it's reactionary now.
Well,
so I don't know.
Yes, yeah, because we've demonstrated where the pressure is.
Right.
The pressure is going to come essentially from the consuming public.
Right. And on Speaker Johnson and where they're going to go on the budget, I have no idea how they get that together. I just don't know.
Yeah, I don't either.
There's so many moving parts on that one.
Mm-hmm.
This is Red Eye Radio on Westwood One. Now, it's Red Eye Radio. Gary McNamara and Eric Harley talk about everything from politics to social issues and news of the day. Whether you're up late or you're just starting your day, welcome to the show. From the Uniden America Studios, this is Red Eye Radio.
All across America, he is Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Welcome and good morning. Thanks so much for being here. This is just great. You know, Bill Maher, was it last week? Kid Rock set up a meeting between Bill Maher and the president. But yeah, Kid Rock really set it up. I mean, I don't think the president told Kid Rock. From what I know, the story is Kid Rock just said, I think it'd be interesting if you guys met.
Right.
I thought he was the catalyst for it.
Right. And Bill Maher is friends with Kid Rock, so, you know, they decided to all get together at Waffle House and sit down.
So, was he at Coachella? Was Nugent and Kid Rock at Coachella?
I don't know. That's the far right stage, wouldn't it be? Yeah.
Oh, my gosh. I don't know why, but I just, in my mind, I was just picturing, you know, the guitar hanging off a shirtless Ted Nugent as, like, he's hanging onto the trapeze, you know, going back and forth across the stage.
You're going back to the loincloth days.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, he keeps his shirt on these days.
We all do at this age.
He even cut his hair several years ago, so yeah.
But that's in my and everybody's booing him because it's Nugent, you know.
Yeah.
Boo,
boo, boo, freedom, boo.
Well, that's the other thing. I mean, we've talked about. Think about this. Joan Baez and Neil Young now support an authoritarian government in the United States. Think about that.
Mm-hmm.
Green Day supports that. You know, Rage Against the Machine, we always knew they did.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because they were clear. Well, we're socialist Marxist. oh, then you don't support freedom.
Mm-hmm.
So why don't you shut up and go away?
Yeah.
If you're going to be in rock and roll. Because, to me, the great thing about rock and roll, it always, to me, represented freedom and autonomy. That's what I really got out of rock and roll my whole life.
Yeah.
That's what I got out of
rebellion,
yes.
freedom, and, it went beyond the artistic freedom that the left will talk about. It was more of kind of liberating yourself from authority in ways. It truly was. It wasn't raging against the machine. It was just moving away from the control of the machine.
Well, it was much more, when you think about it, much more libertarian. We don't trust government.
Yeah.
Because they lie to us.
Exactly.
Right? I mean, when you get down to it, not that they were talking economic theories of, Keynesian economics versus Adam Smith / Milton Friedman. Mm-hmm. Those weren't the discussions that they were having.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there were some ridiculous things that came out of the 60s radicals. Like the concept of free love, like love in any way is free.
It's going to cost you.
Oh, it's going to cost you big time. Oh, I mean,
that cost you.
But we dealt with that because we said, look, they're children, and so children believe that infatuation is love.
Yeah.
So we got to give them a break.
Yeah. Well, these days, it's turning the opposite direction.
That's what I mean. It's
just not. It's not. I'll tell you, there's a documentary series waiting to be made on that. The turn in the sentiment.
What happened to rock and roll? No, because that would be a different topic.
Well, I think, that might be part of it. The
Nobody's
influence,
listening to it.
The cultural influence and the cultural changes and it's funny, my wife and I actually had this conversation over the weekend. We were doing some driving, so we had plenty of time to talk. I did 99.9999% of that. You're shocked, I know. But we have these great conversations often when we're driving, and we talked everything. We talked, just getting caught up on things. But the impact of our sentiment on rock and roll, pop music, whatever it might be. You go back to the day of like Led Zeppelin. Their manager famously turned the tides on the promoters and said, no. You guys don't get 80% and we get 20. We're the artists. We get 80, you get 20. And then you get to the whole digital age, right? Kind of where my wife and I had started the conversation on what people are willing to pay for in the age of Spotify. You're willing, okay, I might give you $10 a month, or I might just go the commercial route and listen to the commercials and do the free route of streaming music. But nobody wants to buy music. Nobody wants to pay for music. Artists don't make money anymore. Writers don't make money anymore by selling their music. Now, they do get the pay per play. It's nothing. It's a fraction of a penny. So you'd have to be a mega Taylor Swift level artist to really be making money on the streamers. But that goes back to, I think, of, this idea of creating idols, along the way and your access to them. Back in our day, we had to go out and we had to buy something tangible. It was a cool process, we thought. And you get artwork with the album, which was, I won't say it was half the point, but it was a big part of it. Yeah. That was a big part of the attraction. One of the first things I ever did was I was just sitting there and learned to draw the album cover of Draw the Line, Aerosmith, which was my first or second album that I ever bought with my own money. And those things have changed. Willing to pay for something. it gets back also to Hollywood. I mean, there's still people going to theaters, but most people budget it in and say, nah, I'll pay for a streamer, and I'll get on that streamer when they have the movies that I want and then jump off when they don't and jump around. I'm not willing to pay for every single movie that comes across. I used to own a video store, and it cost me anywhere from $20 if it was a mega deal on a VHS copy per copy. And we were a little mom and pop store. Then Blockbuster came in, which was part of the movie studios, actually. They launched that. And that was, a game changer. And then it got into, the online stealing, the Napster stealing the music.
That's what I wanted to get to, yeah.
And the free stuff, and then what people were willing to pay for after that. And it was, you can't really, you're not going to make money based on the sales of any individual. I see this all the time. Well, this band says they're putting new music together. And I was like, in the back of my mind, I'm always like, now, good luck with that. But I think there's a part of it, too, that it is generational in that the latest generation, and I know this is the case with my grandchildren, the older of that bunch especially, they don't look to create. They like the music, but they don't have, I had a massive Peter Frampton poster on my wall. There's not that kind of, man, this is cool. That is, and then you gather around and talk. Forget your book club. We were all in the music club. Hey, did you get the latest album by so-and-so? Yes, I've got it. Well, come over. We'll listen to it, whatever.
Going to a record store and actually going through it and then listening to what was being played, on the PA and saying, what's that? Let me check. You got this album here. Let me check it out. I mean, you actually invested time into music, and you brought up Napster, and this goes back to, where rock and roll has gone just because of the whole Coachella thing this weekend, which is not, rage against the machine. It's rage for the machine. Mm-hmm. But when you think about it, when you mention Napster and you think about, remember how Metallica was demonized? Remember Lars being out there saying, this is our work.
Right.
This is our property. And they were viewed as some type of incredible radicals, for doing it. And no, music is free. Music is free. Music should be shared by everybody. It should all be free. All should be free. We should be able to listen to whatever we want. Well, that's hogwash. No, they're not saying that today, are they?
Well, no, they're not
saying that today. They're furious.
And what happened was they don't, that at that point it was clear that much of the public didn't understand the work that goes into putting something together. And it doesn't matter if it's your kind of music and you like the music or don't like the music. There's a ton of work that goes into putting these productions together. You could say the same for television and movies. There's a lot of work that goes into it. The end result is basically judged by the public. But there's a ton of work that goes into, by the time you get signed to a label, or at least back in the day, would get signed to a label, there was a lot of, you were not an overnight success. And there are a few exceptions to that. The work had to be, whether it was studio musicians helping to put it all together for the singer or whatever it might have been, even Bon Jovi's first album, that wasn't the Bon Jovi lineup.
No, he really did that himself.
No, Sambora wasn't even on Runaway.
Yeah, he did that all himself. Right?
Yeah, he put that together. And you think about at that young age, again, whether you like the genre or the songs or the music or the artist or whatever is irrelevant. There's a ton of work put into it. And so then people come back years later and they're like, well, they've got enough money. And then during the Napster thing, and Lars really was on the forefront. He
was, yeah.
He didn't, and there's been a ton of criticism of him over the years, but that fight against Napster, brought about then two things. All right. The recognition of intellectual property in the creative sense, and then also the introduction of the digital age, which meant you didn't have to buy something tangible. You could send it virtually to anybody or share it virtually with anybody, and then that was going to be the future. You think about Netflix. They used to send you a DVD in the mail, and now it's all streaming. And the point being is that it became easier and easier to counterfeit. And then when you get to that point and people don't see a value in it, they're likely not going to return and then go, oh, yeah, no, we now believe again that there's a value to that.
I would tell you this. So, I mean, what's really brought out is in any exchange of anything. If you get something for free, does it have the same value as if you pay for it because you really want it?
Right.
I look back at some of my albums that I keep today, even though I don't play them. I mean, it's just like there's a value to that music because I pay for it. If I pay for anything digital because I have songs on my phone, I actually still do pay for music. And when I pay for something that's good, especially from bands that aren't well known and know that, they sell it on Bandcamp or whatever, and you can pay what you want. And, I'll pay what I think it's worth, but there's a value to that. There's a value in my mind. There's an excitement that I have access to this because I'm buying it from them, and they're limiting where they can, where they put it out,
right?
Because they want to be able to make some money on it. But still, it's got to be horrible to try to be in the music business. But it's the whole thing that when you buy anything, there's more, I think, of an emotional attachment and more because there's a value to it. There's a tangible value. I thought this was worth buying. It's just I didn't listen to it. It sounds. Oh, it's on the radio. I heard it. Fine. Okay, fine. Let's move on to the next one.
We can relate it, to the debt. We can, or people's personal debt. It starts and ends with that. We had Taffer on, and when we talked to him, I asked him a question with Bar Rescue about these small businesses, basically, that were going under, and one of them had nearly $1 million in debt. And I said, well, John, do you think this is generational? What is it that people look at? And they look at it on paper, and they don't put the same value in that debt as they would if it were their own money that they spent, if it's borrowed money. And then you relate that to 36 trillion plus on the national debt level, and that's light years. That's Mars. Mars is in debt. We're not in debt here in the U.S. That's Mars. We're not even ever going to have to deal with any of that. And that's kind of that whole play. That when it becomes that virtual setting, being able to just the process is painless. You walk in with your card, and if you're not using a debit card, you walk in with a credit card and go, boom, and then you walk home with something, and you didn't do anything. Somebody else paid for it.
Well,
you're going to pay them later.
Since I was a bill collector over 50 years ago, and I looked at it, it was all digital money. Because that's what I looked at when I saw on the computer screen.
Yeah.
It was digital.
Yeah.
It meant something to me.
Well, it means something to me when I owe somebody. Yeah. That is something that nobody else can pay.
Remember,
I'm going to pay them.
Remember the Pirate Bar?
Yeah.
The Pirate Bar I think that woman owed like $800,000.
Yeah, that's what I was referring to. Yeah.
$800,000 in debt. And it was like, yeah, I'm in debt. If I was $800,000 in debt and I saw it over a period of a couple of years, you and I said, if I'm making a profit of $1,000 a month and it goes down to $800, I'm worried at that point. Forget about, okay, I was making $1,000 a month and now it's minus $2,000 a month. Let's keep this going for the next 20 years.
Well,
I don't think so.
If you borrow $50,000 for equipment, nothing else happens till you service that debt completely. Yeah. But that's not the mentality of many people. And if they see it in the virtual sense, they don't appreciate the work that has to be put in. And if it's somebody else's money, well, why should you care?
866-90-RED-EYE.
Get in touch with Red Eye Radio, toll free at 866-90-RED-EYE.
It's Red Eye Radio. He's our calling. I'm Gary McNamara. Welcome and good morning. Yeah, I mean, the whole Coachella thing and Bernie Sanders out there just gives us an opportunity to talk about, where rock and roll is today, just where music is today. And think about it. Think about if, I can. A lot of people can't. But I go back to 1970, and I think if there was a censoring that went on like we saw from the left, the bureaucrats in the government to censor, think about this, to censor what we saw. I mean, you could say that in the Vietnam War, they were censoring what was going on and censoring the truth. You saw what kind of backlash that got from rock and roll. Yeah. You think about the censoring of historic proportions that went on and the cooperation between the government and the media. It just wasn't the government lying to the media. It was the government and the media lying, and rock and roll today in music, for the most part, supports that opinion that that's the right way to go if they don't like the issues of the other side. Now, that's a huge leap. That's a very disturbing leap. And so when you have, you know, the Coachella and whether it's Green Day, everybody else, you sit there and you say, what's the point? You know, what's your point? Don't sell rock and roll as something that promotes freedom and the autonomy of the individual, you know, and rebelliousness, whatever. Don't do that. Don't attempt to sell that when that's really not what the message is. The message is from rock and roll today, from Joan Baez, Neil Young, Green Day, whoever else is out there promoting this crap, it is submit and conform.
Yeah, I mean, rock and roll didn't have a side politically, if you think about it.
You're right, yeah.
Originally, there is no side. It was neither side. None of the above. And now, that's very clear.
Catch all 5 hours of the show live every night on the Red Eye Radio app. Available in the App Store. Red Eye Radio.
And he is Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Welcome and good morning. All right, let's play this audio here. This is just great stuff. Bill Maher from Friday night and from the Washington Post and CNN, Josh Rogan on criticizing him, saying, you know, it's not your fault. In fact, he gets to a part where he says, stop patronizing me here.
Yeah.
It's like, but basically, Trump had a PR motive. Trump's using you, and it's just it gets to be just it just gets to be great here. But here we go. All right. Let this thing rip.
Okay. So the idea here is that your motivation is sound, but what's the impact? And I think a lot of people out there, fans of yours, people who love you, people who are fans of you, like me, I've been fan of you.
You don't have to patronize me, dude. I don't know you. I never met you.
I'm just saying that this comes from
not everybody has to like it. That's what we said. There are people who didn't want it to happen at all. You sound like one of them. It's okay. No. But did you hear what I said?
Yeah.
Like, what is the alternative to not talking? Just sit at your lunch table and don't talk to anybody?
I talked to him. I've interviewed Trump. Here's the interview.
That's just not an interview. This was not an interview.
I agree with the principle of engagement. I'm just saying, from his perspective, you have to understand that people out there know, all Americans know, that for him this was a PR stunt, and in his view, you were a prop in that PR stunt. Okay.
Yeah, you see, I don't agree with that.
Yeah.
I don't agree with that.
That doesn't mean it wasn't the right thing to do. It just
But if you go on social media for 5 minutes now, you just have these tribal fury raging all day long. Everyone's got to be implacably there, implacably here. And actually, most Americans and most Brits, they're not like that. So there's this screaming going on between these tribes, and actually walking across that line, sitting down, having dinner, having a laugh, having a chat. And then the idea that Bill Maher is now going to stop criticizing Donald Trump with him is preposterous.
I didn't do it before. I didn't do it in the monologue. I didn't do it with Steve Bannon. And the fact that you began your little rant with the internet, that tells me everything. You take your cues from the internet. Good luck.
No. Listen.
The internet is a cesspool that just wants to fight. And it's okay.
I support what you're trying to do. I'm just saying the expectation that Donald Trump is going to be changed by such
I said in the piece I did not think that was going to happen.
In that case, then go with
I love the people on either side who ignore the parts they don't like and then and I just did it. It wasn't like it was 3 weeks ago.
There you go. Wow, Josh
By the way,
Rogan
we stand with them on that last part.
The what?
We stand with them on that last part. The people that just on it doesn't matter what side you're on, that just ignore or pick and choose what you say. And this whole garbage of 99% of the internet based on what?
Yeah, that's what he said. He goes, 99% of the internet basically disagreed with Bill Maher. And I'm like, going to see Trump. Look, I don't care to sit there and say a politician or Bill Maher would use it for PR. Well, that's fine. I don't care.
Yeah. Right.
I don't care. I mean, if anybody wishes to meet and sit down to dinner and discuss the issues, that's fine. The problem with the left is the left actually doesn't want to be cross-examined on anything. Trump was all right with it. I'll sit down. If he disagrees with me, that's fine. I don't mind. If he didn't mind if Bill Maher was there cross-examining him, that possibility could happen. He didn't care.
Right.
Liberals care. I think that's actually the problem, is that liberals are afraid to be cross-examined by the right.
Right.
Actually held on the issues. And this is one of the reasons right here. I want to play this because this was on MSNBC. This is just totally and completely bizarre. This is a trans proponent on MSNBC, and listen to this here. You couldn't tear this apart so easily. Here we go. All right,
Charlotte, you and I have talked about this offline. I mean, the Republicans love to fearmonger. That's their currency. It galvanizes people to vote based on fear, not on facts. I always like to say, don't vote on feelings, vote on facts. Ground our viewers right now on why making trans people the boogeyman is just something that the Republicans want to do right now. And to your point, they're going to move on from that, and they're going to make another group targeted, and the next round of fear-mongering continues.
That gets right to the heart of it. So there are two things. First of all, according to polling, most Americans believe they don't personally know a trans person, which makes it a lot easier to be bystanders when the trans community is attacked. The second thing, of course, is that only one party is really talking about trans issues. It's the Republican Party. They've made trans issues one of their central topics in campaigning and the national discourse, what have you. The more the Democrats ignore this, the more it's going to come back to haunt us in future elections. Republicans are not going to let up on this. They're not going to leave it alone. They're not going to stop this, and we're going to suffer. And here's what I find ironic about all this. It's very easy to fight back on trans issues. The science is on our side. Every credible medical organization has come out and endorsed gender-affirming care and said that the trans military ban is ridiculous and unnecessary. They've said that trans women should be housed in women's prisons. I mean, these are all policies that make sense if you're willing to fight back. But
number one, there's no fear mongering.
No,
there's no. It's like the whole thing. Remember the transphobia? Scared? What am I scared of? The reason the right is reacting. The right is reacting to what started with President Obama. President Obama went in, and it became news when he did it. President Obama, with the Department of Justice and the Department of Education, changed the definition of what a woman is in Title IX. That's a huge issue. That is legislation that was passed by Congress to ensure that women could play sports. So we're simply saying, no, science is not on your side. You are not, because you think you're a woman and you're a man, you're not. And vice versa. End of story. I have no emotion about it at all.
It's not my life.
It's simply not factual. It is false. And so, as they're saying, the only ones talking about trans issues are Republicans. No, Republicans are responding to the insanity of what started with Obama and then continued through Biden. And that's the insanity of the radical transgender movement, the misogyny, the women hatred that has come out, the threats, the bullying, all from the left. That's what, if Republicans get passionate and women get passionate, it's because you are taking away their opportunity. Mm-hmm. That's why. And you're throwing out crap. You're throwing out BS. A man cannot be a woman because a man says so. End of story. You have no science. Every credible medical organization. Is there any credible medical organizations left?
Yeah, exactly.
That's that question.
Qualify these credible organizations.
Qualify that.
The same ones that took us through COVID? Those?
And I love that, and I don't know who the anchor was. I didn't recognize the anchor from, then again, I don't recognize unless it's Rachel Maddow or the now gone Joy Reid.
Yeah.
But the people that practice identity politics, accusing the Republicans of picking on this one group just for the heck of it, and then they're going to pick on another group after this. From the party of identity politics that lives by judging people by groups and not individuals, to make that accusation against Republicans is just ludicrous.
Well, you know, it's, again, what they don't see on the left is that they're making this about left and right. No, the left is taking on the parents. The left is taking on women. Mm-hmm. And there are too many women on the left that have been way too quiet about this. Only a few have spoken out. But when it comes to the parents, they're not going to stand around quietly. You're fighting a battle you won't win.
I just love that. Trying to make the case that nobody is against men in women's prisons. Mm-hmm. I mean, my God, people, what type of drugs are they doing?
Yeah, this has been they're just trying to almost Jedi mind trick their way through this. Nobody cares about this. It's not affecting anybody. They've tried all these arguments. Mm-hmm. And it's only the right that is concerned about it. Nope. It's the parents. And you picked a fight you're not going to win. You picked a fight that's a loser all day. Politically, where it goes is one thing, but on a day-to-day basis, if you continue to go after their kids as they promised they would, expect that fight to continue and get larger. The pushback will get larger. What you saw in November of 24, the biggest driver on women's issues to the voters was not abortion. It was men in women's locker rooms. That should tell you where we are. And the left is going to sit around and they're going to try and dismiss it as this or that. It doesn't matter. You chose a fight with a group that you won't be able to overcome. The parents are not going to stand around and let the left take their children. They're just not. You're not going to win this with. The blue states can do what they want over and over again until they can't, by the way. There are parts of the world that are very, very liberal that are reversing this kind of policy and looking because they know you're not winning with the parents. You know, the left doesn't have any new ideas. They don't have any way to go back to what they used to promote. There's no way to moderate for them. Because Bill Maher, of all people, has dinner with the president and Kid Rock, and it's the end of the internet. They cannot, there's no way you can do this. Chuck Schumer did on the continuing resolution, not an abortion bill, continuing resolution. Just saying the words continuing resolution make me want to take a nap.
Well,
it's so boring.
Think about
it. Of a bill.
Last week, Democrats were talking about the fact that AOC and Bernie cannot be the leaders of their party.
Right.
And that's who the leaders of their party is.
But you can't change that.
What's happened to my congresswoman? She hasn't spoken anything for a week.
Oh, that means there's something big coming. It always does.
Jasmine Crockett. What's
Quiet
going on
before
with
the
her?
storm.
Because I wanted her to replace AOC as the leader.
Right. She'll be up there somewhere. And
is she taking dialect training so she can talk in a different type of accent?
Maybe. But there's that entire approach on the left hasn't worked. And Chuck Schumer doing really the only thing that he could do is demonized. And again, now there's talk of AOC challenging him in the Senate in New York. And it was always going to be that way. Don't you dare do one thing. You can't vote with Trump on anything. You can't do anything. You can't say anything even moderately nice about President Trump, or you're done on the left.
866-90 Red Eye.
We'll be right back with more Red Eye Radio with Eric Harley and Gary McNamara.
It's Red Eye Radio. He's Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Welcome and good morning. Well, where are Republicans going to go on the budget? Speaker Mike Johnson said he's no big fan of the rumored idea to raise the top tax rate. Well, it's actually not a rumor.
It's more than a rumor, Speaker Johnson.
It's been written about the fact that Republicans are tossing that back and forth. About whether to do it or not. They haven't made a decision on it, but Mike Johnson coming out and saying he's not a big fan of it. What's going on with the no taxes on Social Security? We're getting closer here.
I think they're going to double the taxes on Social Security, but only for talk show hosts that work overnight.
Who complain about it.
If you have any history whatsoever of complaining about it, it could be triple. That's changing on the fly, like the tariff situation. It's fluid.
The special Gary Social Security tariff.
Exactly.
This is Red Eye Radio on Westwood One. Now, it's Red Eye Radio. Gary McNamara and Eric Harley talk about everything from politics to social issues and news of the day. Whether you're up late or you're just starting your day, welcome to the show. From the Uniden America Studios, this is Red Eye Radio.
All across America, we are Red Eye Radio. He is Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Welcome and good morning. Thanks for being here. Just checking out the markets. U.S. markets are up right now. Looking at the U.S. 10-year Treasury bill, 4.47. 30-year, 4.88. Close to where they were last week.
Yeah. Yeah, it hasn't moved much.
Right, higher than when we were here last. So that is a concern. I see the futures are up. Are the futures up because Trump came out yesterday and said, look, there's no exemptions, whatever. But the market has said, yeah, there is, because you said the 20% fentanyl will be on all the products. We're just putting everything else in another category. Did that imply to the market that the 125% tariffs on iPhones and everything was not going to be charged? That's what I got out of it.
Yeah.
Which added more confusion.
Yeah.
Because
it's clear that the market still believes that the massive China tariffs are not going to be long-lasting. And then you got to settle into, okay, what would be the impact if it's 10% across the board for other nations, if that were to continue after 90 days, and 20% for China, and then the 25 on Mexico and Canada. But that will be more of assessing the actual retail impact as it happens. So I think that's where the market is on pricing any of that in. So I think right now it's believed that those massive tariffs on China, something is going to be worked out.
Trying to think if I've seen, I didn't buy anything that would have a tariff on this weekend, though. Trying to think if nobody's. I was reading the other day, well, have you got a tariff surcharge? Are any retailers putting that on anything?
You mean like putting it on the receipt?
Yeah. Are they actually using a tariff?
Or pricing on the shelf? I don't know. I don't know yet. I would imagine some will. On the bigger ticket items, you really don't have much of a choice other than to make it public or make it apparent to the consumer that's shopping, and especially like with the automotive stuff. There's probably going to be stuff posted everywhere at dealerships.
And this is the question that I had, because you actually brought it up about auto dealerships early in the show, that the automobile, the OEMs are saying, well, we're going to have it across we may take it and spread it all out, not just on the vehicles that are being tariffed, but on all vehicles, and even because of parts that are coming in, you would see it in service, and you'd see it, again, spread out across the board.
That's what analysts are saying, and
right. So we're not
we haven't seen dealerships say that, but they're saying that. Yeah.
Right, but then you would see. I'm wondering if other retail outlets would do the same thing, where they just have a general tariff surcharge. They figure out what it is for everything in their inventory, take an average of it, divide it by all the so particular products don't go up, and it's spread across the board.
Yeah, it's basically the cost of business, and then you spread that out so that, again, there's not a 25% impact, 25% increase impact on one product, and then only 10% on a smaller product. You try and even that out. I don't know how they factor that into the service itself beyond the parts, or if they do, but it will impact the service department based on parts, and at the very least. So I don't know what the formula is, but it would make sense that they do that and try not to have an uneven impact. Otherwise, there's some vehicles that are going to become bricks, and they're not going to move. There's already, with the Stellantis shutting down assembly or pausing the assembly in Mexico and Canada, then that is to say, well, we don't believe we're going to be able to sell them at those prices, so we're not going to assemble them and bring them here yet. We're going to wait until any of this or all of this is figured out.
House Speaker Mike Johnson is no big fan of hiking the tax rate for America's wealthiest to 40%, an idea reportedly being mulled by Republicans to offset some cost of their in-progress tax package. This from Fox News. We're the Republican Party. We are for tax reduction for everyone, and that's a general principle that we have always tried to abide by, he told Fox News on Sunday. Though there are many discussions, thoughts, and theories of how to get all of the GOP's goals accomplished, Johnson said he wouldn't put any money on any of those yet. I would just say stay tuned. The next 5 to 6 weeks are going to be critical as all of these negotiations happen in the committees of the jurisdiction. You'll hear a lot of rumors and a lot of talks. We'll see where it all ends. Johnson voiced the need for consensus on the package, eyeing the 218 votes needed in the House and 51 needed in the Senate for successful passage, assuring viewers that the bill will have reached an adequate comfort level before heading to the floor. What is that comfort level with everything that they need to accomplish by what they have promised?
Right.
You know, I did see, you know, we talked about last week that Elon Musk and Doge all of a sudden came out and said what they'd be saving by 2026, and it wasn't close to what they said was currently being saved.
Right.
And we said, whoa. You know, we had said a long time ago when they came out with the $5,000, remember, Doge dividend, and we said, not happening.
Well, and that's problematic when you start saying that. It sounds like the administration is promising that. And even if you're trying, you know, it's a trial balloon and you're floating that idea to see what the response will be, that's a problem because we're not talking 500. We were talking 5,000 per family. And that's a big deal when people, again, have been underwater financially for a while and they're looking for relief. Don't float something unless you know you've got the votes on Capitol Hill to get that done. And there was no way that they did. It was just way above what anybody, even the breakdown in the $4 billion a day that Elon Musk said, a lot of analysts went back and said, no, we don't see that. We'll be generous and give you half. Now, again, you and I made the point of, well, if Eric and Gary went in there with Elon, we could all three agree on, hey, we don't need to be spending money on that. That's not the point. Because the promise was, or the claim that was being made, is this is stuff that can all be cut and nobody would be affected.
Right.
And that becomes especially dangerous when you're asking Congress to get something done on cuts on the budget, and then ultimately you're challenging them to live up to that, which is where conservatives on Capitol Hill went. And then last week, the $150 billion was right in line with what the House was promoting in terms of cuts.
What Elon Musk said they would be able to save a year by 2026, which would be, I guess, next year's budget is what they're talking about. And we said, well, that lines up with exactly the other 150 billion that they had talked about. But when you look at it, as we've said, is that 150 billion off the whole thing, or is that just 150 billion off of the is that 150 billion in cuts that are then going to be substituted with other things?
Right. If you're using it to pay for other things, you're not cutting spending. You're just spending it differently.
Right. And that's the point that we asked yesterday, and we don't know the answer to that. Now, the problem is, for example, the New York Times picked up on it immediately. They said, Doge, all the promises of Doge aren't coming true. Right. Doge promise right now, what they promised they'd cut, and then not even the first time, because remember, the first thing was $2 trillion a year. Then it went to $1 trillion a year. Now it's $150 billion, and they're like, Doge is only going to promise for 2026 15% of what they said they were going to get to, which would have been the $1 trillion.
Yeah.
Of, cut per year, but they're not going to get it. So expect that criticism to be there from the, from the Democrats. It's like the same thing when they talked about the tariff dividend. We said, well, there's not going to be any type of massive tariff dividend. You're not going to be able to get that.
Right.
And so the 5,000, we said, don't be promoting. And it was funny because I remember the first day we said it, I got a ton of emails saying, no, don't oversell and underperform. Undersell and overperform.
Exactly.
A bunch of listeners were saying that to me. And it's like, well, yeah, because, there was a lot of, you think about it, if this budget comes in and they're like, well, we're going to be spending, well, we've had cuts, but because we gave the tax cuts and everything else, because remember, this is Republicans saying that the tax cuts are going to cost them. So apparently the Laffer curve, they believe they've reached.
Right.
Which is the whole point that if you cut taxes a certain amount. By the way, have you heard anything more from the House in response to Trump saying he wants to take capital gains tax down to zero?
No.
That came out. I heard nothing since on that one.
No.
I don't think that's figured out with the $150 billion that they believe that they can save versus what they need to pay for no tax on Social Security, no tax on overtime, and no tax on tips.
Right.
Because it seems like that's what they're saying. The $150 billion is going to pay for that. Well, then where's the overall cut in the budget that people are expecting? Because it was promoted like crazy in Doge. Mm-hmm. First we can save $2 trillion a year, which we said, no, you can't. And we were criticized for saying that. But as you can see, nobody is talking anything close to $2 trillion a year. Then they took it down to $1 trillion, and now they say next year it would be $150 billion. By the way, by this time next year, Doge will be complete.
Mm-hmm.
Well, actually, it won't be. July 4th. No, but they've said they may up it. Mm-hmm. That they've done so much work that they'll be able to tell you what they can cut sooner than that. Mm-hmm. But still, it would be July 4th, which is way too late to do anything because the midterms are around the corner. And believe
you don't want
me,
to do anything between July and November.
Yeah, believe me, they're not going to sit there and say Trump's not going to introduce his budget in July 5th,
right?
And saying we're cutting $1 trillion in spending before a midterm.
You're not.
That's not happening.
It's not going to happen. Not going to happen. I don't have. Again, I said it last hour. I don't have. I've got zero confidence that the GOP is going to move in any direction, do anything differently, basically, and that comes from history. But it's also what's going on in the current makeup on Capitol Hill for a long time. We've only had, relatively speaking, a handful of true conservatives, especially fiscal conservatives, that are willing to fight for real cuts and getting our fiscal house in order. And that's quite unfortunately our reality right now. Because if they stand where we stand, and that is, if you are looking in the House at $150 billion a year, $1.5 trillion over 10 years of cuts, we want to see that off the top. Don't say those cuts are going to pay for this. We want it off the top.
If they don't make cuts off the top, which means the entire budget is less than it was the year before,
right?
Can they get the Republican votes that they have needed? Since the Republican conservatives, that are very few of them, probably 7, 8, 9, whatever, will they stick to this time and say, we gave you the continuing resolution, we gave you the framework, we're not going to give you this?
Well, will they shoot it down? They've been told a couple of times now. Fight down the road. Don't fight this. Well, eventually that fight's got to come about. And if you tell them that again, that will be really the last fight before the midterm.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And they're doomed at home if they don't fight.
866-90 Red Eye.
Brought to you by Hot Shot Secret.
Hi, I'm Jen Loomis, a transport safety expert at JJ Keller, and I'm here to share a tip on compliance, safety, accountability. Compliance, Safety, Accountability, or CSA, is the FMCSA Safety, Compliance, and Enforcement Program. Its goal is to hold motor carriers and drivers accountable for highway safety and to reduce crashes, injuries, and fatalities on our roads. CSA does this by assessing the safety performance of motor carriers and drivers based on data collected during roadside inspections, crash reports, and FMCSA investigations. Based on the data that is compiled, motor carriers are assigned a score. The carrier is then grouped with other carriers who have had a similar number of safety events. Carrier scores within the group are then ranked to determine intervention priority. Low scores are better, so carriers with the highest scores are those that are most likely to be targeted for intervention by the FMCSA. Interventions range in severity and may include warning letters, roadside, off-site, or on-site inspections, civil penalties, or operation out-of-service orders. This tip was brought to you by J.J. Keller & Associates. Visit us at jjkeller.com.
Coming up, more with Gary McNamara and Eric Harley. It's Red Eye Radio.
It's Red Eye Radio. He's Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Coming up on the bottom of the hour, where we're going to get our electricity from. Also, I love this headline. Urged on by the Teamsters, Minneapolis City Council looks to crack down on food delivery robots.
Ah.
You see where this is going, right?
Yeah. Yep.
How are unions going to fight AI? We'll get to that coming up.
Mm-hmm.
This story here, I find this really interesting. I mean, it's horrible what happened. Josh Shapiro and the arsonist at the Pennsylvania governor's house.
Yeah.
The suspect, 38 years old, will be charged with terrorism, arson, and other offenses. And these are specific charges. And the reason I sound like that where I say specific charges, he'll be charged with attempted murder, terrorism, aggravated arson, and aggravated assault against an enumerated person, according to officials.
Mm-hmm.
Those are pretty specific charges.
Right.
Why no intent? What was the motive?
We haven't heard that at all. They haven't. Yeah. Authorities haven't told us what the motive is. And they have to know, right?
I would assume. I mean, with specific charges, they're not holding them, for example, you can make the case, aggravated arson and attempted murder, right?
Yeah, right.
When you say terrorism, for example, if I go to a politician's house and just burn it down, is that terrorism?
Yeah, is it just terrorism?
Is it
motivated by something? What's the motivation behind the terrorism?
Right.
I mean, technically, yes, it fits terrorism, but there has to be a mindset, a motive behind that.
Right.
And I haven't seen that yet.
Attempted murder, aggravated arson, absolutely. You say, okay, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But but the aggravated assault against an enumerated person means you had a list. That's what that means.
Right.
It's a person on a list. Well, that means specifically you know what the motive is. It would, excuse me, you're giving the assumption to someone like me that you know what the motive is. Why aren't we being told?
Right.
And that's what got me with those specific charges that, okay, well, they know why he did it. Right?
Yeah. Right. I mean, it seems as if they know it.
Is it terrorism because they found other explosives that he had?
Maybe.
Catch all 5 hours of the show live every night on the Red Eye Radio app. Available in the App Store. Red Eye Radio.
And he is Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Welcome and good morning. Thank you so much for being here. But just interesting that, those specific charges against a 38-year-old suspect who committed arson and at the state house of Josh Shapiro. And you just wonder, okay, what's the motive? And still we're, 24 hours now?
Mm-hmm.
And no motive yet, those specific charges. And I mean, is the terrorism based on the fact that they found a lot of other incendiary devices that he had? Could that be it?
Maybe.
But there really hasn't been an explanation on the charges based on what they believe the possible motive was for him doing it. So we'll be looking for that.
Mm-hmm.
So here's this headline here, National Review. Urged on by the Teamsters, Minneapolis City Council looks to crack down on food delivery robots. The robots showed up on the University of Minnesota's Twin Cities campus last fall. For a few bucks, the small fleet of robots resembling fancy coolers on 6 wheels will deliver Chinese food and Starbucks coffee to students in need of a meal or caffeine. The university leader told a local news station that they were aiming at servicing locations on campus that just don't have great accessibility to food. Plus, because they're electric power, they can help reduce greenhouse gas emissions, a state study found. Students said they're cheap and convenient. I think automated systems such as robots are going to be less expensive than individuals driving their car, one student told a local reporter. But the robots are now in the crosshairs of the far-left Minneapolis City Council and members of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters who see them as a threat. In February, barely halfway through 1 year council-approved pilot study, Councilwoman Robin Wansley called for a staff report on the program and the impact the robots are having on workers locally and in other locations. She identifies herself as Minneapolis's first black independent socialist city council member and an opponent of the rotten system of racial capitalism. A year after the council went to battle with rideshare companies over their pay rates and nearly ran them out of the city, council people are now eyeing increased regulation on the delivery robots. During a committee meeting on Wednesday, Wansley, the leader of a successful campaign to raise the city's minimum wage to $16 an hour, said she was now looking to figure out how not to replicate mistakes they made in negotiations with Uber and Lyft. It's not clear what regulations the council is considering or if protectionist members will ultimately allow the robots to continue operating in Minneapolis at the conclusion of the pilot. But Teamsters members who spoke Wednesday were clear where they stand. Justin, a Teamster cook at the university, called the robots symptoms of a wider attack on working people and complained that cities are being turned into playgrounds for the rich tech bros who have remade those cities in their own image. I'm not against technological innovation and outright advance. I would love to see technological developments which improve the quality of life and lead to more leisure time to self-actualize outside of our daily wage labor drudgery. But this is not the trend we're seeing. I don't know what they expect. Technology is going to take certain jobs. It always has.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think about the kiosks that you can order now if you go inside fast food. Many of the fast food places have set up. What it used to take in terms of manpower to operate one fast food location, it has been greatly reduced by different levels of automation. And created, these efficiencies that were created and implemented over the years, that's not going to turn around. Much to the dismay of socialists or unions or whoever wants to fight against it, it's coming because the demand is there. I actually am curious about the efficiency of robots in terms of being able to deploy them and have them, I guess if you're talking about a university campus, maybe it's different in that kind of setting. I know that Amazon was rethinking their delivery of deploying robots in neighborhoods to do basically, simultaneously deliver your Amazon package or packages in that neighborhood with these robots as they deploy them. And they pulled that back because they realized, well, the maintenance on that, we're not at the point yet where that's going to be a more efficient process. It's going to create more headaches than it's worth. I think they're still working on the drone delivery thing, but it is the private sector that will find the more efficient route based on that efficiency based on our demand overall, and I don't care if it's local leaders or national leaders or unions or anybody else, you can't stop that. When the port workers were going to go on strike, they don't want the automation. There was this expansion that happened after the LA ports strike that basically sent shippers to other ports, Texas, Georgia, New York. And then what the port workers union saw was this expansion that's ramping up as the demand continues to increase for a more efficient supply chain overall. And you can't undo that demand. You can't change the demand. You just can't. There are certain things that if it becomes price prohibitive, that the consumer will slow down on. We talked about tariffs and how all of that works. But in terms of a more efficient process, in fact, that's the whole point. We want it cheaper. We want it faster.
Well, that's why we asked the question the other day. Let's say, hypothetically, all the tariffs are the right thing to do, okay, because we need to bring manufacturing back. What are we going to be bringing back? Are people going to be assembling widgets, or is it going to be AI doing it?
Right.
And we asked the question anyway, are any of these free trade agreements antiquated because of AI coming in? Now, we've tried to look at we would say would be the reasonable efficiencies of AI out there, some of the studies that are out there, and the more reasonable ones say between 20 and 40% increased productivity. Now, that's huge, by the way. That number is mind-boggling if it's across the board in an economy. Mm-hmm. If that's the case, do tariffs or protectionist measures or trade or anything matter at that particular point if you have that huge amount of increased productivity? I don't know and I said it the other day. By the way, there was an article the other day that talked about a couple of articles that were written about Joe Rogan and his way of asking questions, which is making a statement. Did you see that? Did you read that over the weekend? Mm-hmm. And I laughed about it because something that you and I always say. I'll say it, and I didn't. When I read that, I went, "Oh wow!" I've always known, and we've said, "Look, there's time we've asked questions where we're making statements, and we make sure that we tell you if we're asking a question. We'll always say, I'm actually making a statement by asking the question." Or, as we did last week, when we talked about AI and its impact on tariffs, we made sure we said, we're asking a question out of pure curiosity. We don't know what the answer is. And I just thought it was interesting that Rogan's being accused of asking questions. They're leading questions, and they're trying to make a statement. And I went, oh, that's interesting, because we always make sure we qualify that. Mm-hmm. But I don't know what the answer is to that. Does AI change everything? Does AI make it where, sorry, you can't do free trade agreements anymore? Everything is just opened up? Unless you're involved in, again, stealing technology or whatever. If the United States, as we have been for such a long time across the board, one of the leaders in productivity, is it going to be any difference with AI? Or will we do the same thing with AI? And therefore, AI can replace any third world worker. And if it can, does that situation matter anymore? Or is that problem gone for the United States? It may be a problem for those countries as to what they do to bring employment, but is that a problem for the United States?
Well, because the ultimate question, too, would be how does it change what we consume, how we consume it, what we're willing to pay for it? Because if you create a more efficient, again, really, it is the very beginning of the supply chain, is the manufacturing of whatever product might be in demand. If we're talking about applying AI to manufacturing, then that by creating a more efficient delivery system, delivery infrastructure, a supply chain beginning there, then you create greater ability to compete on a price basis. And that's really where the competition, the brunt of the competition comes in. And what are you competing for? Well, we're the biggest consumers. The U.S. is the market. That's the one everybody wants access to.
Here's some of the questions I would have, for example, because you talked about the process of AI, but the process of AI across the entire board of the spectrum of the entire economy. For example, you and I were looking at some of the stories out there that are saying that if oil goes below $60, in fact, I already just saw a story the other day saying, looking at certain West Texas drilling out there, saying it's starting to drop now. Mm-hmm. The number of drilling rigs is starting to drop out there. I've had a couple of people that are in the business that have been posting stuff online. What happens if, what will AI's effect be, for example, on the oil industry, right, on natural gas, on fossil fuels, on coal? I'm bringing up coal because the president said he's, opening that up, on nuclear, everything that we talk about, because if you talk about increasing the efficiency and productivity, not just in one level of manufacturing, but all across the board, what will AI do for mining? I don't know. I'm not a mechanical futurist who has looked into all that stuff, but somebody's doing the numbers out there. How will it affect mining? And mining includes oil and natural gas.
Well,
too.
there's no way it won't have an impact in creating a more efficient process. If you think about exploration, it's changed quite a bit since in the 40 years. I've got family members that were involved in it back in the early to mid 80s, and then one family member that's still involved in it. And you think about the technology that was used in exploration, and the going after that, the drilling. You had Scott or Brian Sheffield. Scott was his dad. Brian Sheffield basically talking about shale drilling, and he was saying recently that below $60, they were going to really stop the focus on that. And it's going to be more of these short-term contracts that they're going to focus on for the time being. And we'll see where that goes there. But talking to one family member over the weekend who's still part of it is that, it depends on what your process is and what your company is, what the expenses are overall. So vertical is more expensive than the horizontal drilling. You can be more efficient in that process of horizontal drilling. And so they have a little more breathing room, but still it's going to be that slowdown, knowing that, if we believe, and this is what you're seeing overall, if we believe that tariffs are going to be short-lived, then we know that the greater profits are going to come back. And even a recession is short-lived. We at least hope that will be the case if we're in a recession, and you put a pause on the big stuff until those profits come back. So, but I think it will be a more efficient process. But I'm with you. I don't know exactly what that will look like with AI being involved in the future in that process.
866-90-RED-EYE.
Lines open for your calls. 866-90-RED-EYE on Red Eye Radio.
We are Red Eye Radio. He is Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Download our Red Eye Radio app today. Why? Because our show ends in an hour, and after our show is over, we record the entire show, and then it becomes our podcast. So you can listen when and where you choose, and if you can't listen to one of our great radio stations overnight, we also stream live on our app all 5 hours here on Red Eye Radio.
And thank you for listening.
Yeah. Coming up, the latest polling out there, and what are we going to do for electricity? All of a sudden, even blue states, renewable's not going to work for us.
Yeah.
AI's
Imagine
coming.
that.
We need energy. How do we get it?
This is Red Eye Radio on Westwood One.